Excellent. We'll just give it.
Wow.
Excellent. Well, now that it's noon, I think we'll get underway. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, wherever you are. I am Zach. I'm the content marketing manager for Demostack. I just want to give a big thanks to RevGenius and Christina for helping us and putting this together. We're all really looking forward to the discussion today, I think. So we're going to take a look at product-led growth, what exactly it entails, how it compares to the traditional sales process, and why so many companies are moving towards it today. We'll also take a look at how PLG fits within the enterprise sales motion and how complex solutions that require more hand-holding through the sales cycle and how PLG can kind of work within that and how demo experience platforms can help bridge that gap. So today we have Mandy Gifford, the new Senior Director of Product-Led Growth at TalkDesk. Congratulations on that, Mandy. She was previously at Neo4j and Keep. She's an expert in PLG and has been leading the charge in PLG strategy probably before a lot of us knew what it even was. Then we also have Breezy Beaumont, the head of growth at Correlated. Breezy herself is a brilliant and award-winning PLG expert. If you haven't checked her out on LinkedIn, you absolutely should. She's a wealth of knowledge there. Correlated itself is also the leading CRM for PLG. Definitely worth taking a look at. And last but certainly not least, we have our very own Eric Portugal Welsh, who is the Demostack's own Director of RevOps. Eric is our master of all things RevOps and comes from Duda, Fivetran, and Upselling as well. So with that, we'll get into the discussion. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll make sure we'll get them answered for you. And we'll get to the experts on this. So Eric, off to you.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and we'll dig into this. Cool. Welcome, everyone. Really happy to be here, alongside some pretty big hitters in this space. So let's just dive into this, shall we? So product-led growth, it's great. It makes the product the star of your show. When we think of it, we think of companies like Slack, Monday, Notion, and Zoom. Companies and products where you can just sign up and immediately start using the product. And that takes care of a couple problems. First, you have the bottleneck of scheduling a bunch of meetings and conversations with prospects. And second, if your product is easy to start with, then why actually have in-person sales motion for that?
Hey, Eric, can I pause you for just one second?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your speaker notes are also up, if you don't mind, yeah, perfect. There we go.
Got that. 1 second. Let me actually do
this
like I've done this before.
No worries.
Cool. Can you see that?
Yes.
Cool. All right. But not every product was, can you still see my speaker notes?
No.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. So the one problem here is that not every product is built with this kind of use in mind. Some products, when we think of these like Salesforce or HubSpot, require a lot of setup and integration. For example, just throwing somebody in there might not be a great strategy. They could really mess things up. So what I like to talk about today is how do we bring product-led growth into the enterprise products? How can we bring the more complicated or involved products where we rely on customer-facing teams to show the product and the prospects setup, or whether the prospects need extra help or realizing the potential of products, especially in higher value deals? In short, how can we show up the product and so that our product takes a lot of the show?
Awesome. So I think you kind of touched on it there, Eric, and it might be a good place to kind of bring in Breezy and Mandy on this. But when it gets into the types of products that are kind of built to be used immediately and those that are definitely are not, like a Salesforce, for example, for the group, like what products or companies do you think that this sort of applies to? Like where do you think the line is as far as what you can start using right away and really where you probably need a lot of assistance to get it set up and get it going?
Yeah, one of the things I like to think about is like the complexity of the product, one thing, and then the other side of that also is what is your total addressable market, or how many people out there, how many different types of companies can use your product. So if you have an incredibly complex product, it can be difficult to have that product-led route for someone to get started immediately, because they might be able to get started, but it might be hard for them to get value immediately. And we all know how important that piece of it is. There are different kind of tactics and ways that I've seen companies do this. So we can definitely jump into that more deeply at the end. But I think that's one of the things. And then the other side that I talked about, which is your addressable market. If you can only go after 50 companies could possibly be a customer for you, maybe product-led growth isn't as strong of a fit. Whereas if you have a wide total addressable market, it might make more sense for you to be a product-led company. So those are just a couple quick tips that came to mind for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Breezy. I think that was all really good. I think one other thing to note, I think, is that if you have a complex product, it usually fits a lot of use cases or a lot of personas, a lot of scenarios, and it can be hard to pinpoint where you want to start or where you want to talk through. But I do think that a lot of the jobs that things are doing is the same. So it may do one scenario for every type of persona, and can you show just that one scenario, or can you break your product apart a little bit and show, based on what a user is there for, can you show specifics for that specific use case, which can sometimes help at least show some value in your product without showing the whole thing up front, which is sort of the crux of product-led growth in my mind, is that you're not trying to get the largest contract up front, you're trying to get them to see value and then eventually add on that value and continue to expand with you. And that sometimes is a little bit more challenging to get started with, but makes a lot of sense in the long run.
Cool. All right, let's jump ahead. It's cool. So let's dive into kind of the traditional sales process that we see here. So when we look at this in terms of like our acquisition funnel, we're looking at it in kind of that general sales process mentality. And that's kind of where my background lies, not in the product-led growth, in more of the kind of standard typical, SaaS sales cycle. So when we think of, acquisition down through marketing qualified lead, this big chunk here in the sales qualified discovery and demo, that's where like the meat and potatoes is of our sales cycle, where marketing comes in, where the typical sales cycle has, lots of slides. We love slides, PDFs, generic demos. Then we move into kind of that more tailored demo, takes a lot more effort, and then the trial POC before we move into the negotiation and close. One of the really interesting pieces here, and the concerns that we have, buyer's remorse, that I think we'll touch on in a minute. You see a product from the outside, but you don't actually get to use it. So is what you're buying what you actually get in the end? You have uses that you want versus the stuff that's needed, something that might be different, by the time you actually end up purchasing. And then you have a lot of instances where you're getting kind of this view through rose-colored lenses where you're getting all the best. And so when it comes down to the implementation and the complexities there, maybe what you end up with is not even close to what you were promised.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that a little bit more if we could, especially the buyer's remorse aspect of going through this entire process, which can take weeks to months. And then at the end, the final product is not what anyone was thinking at all. So I guess the question is has anyone experienced this buyer's remorse? Especially even, I even think about this, even when you get into the trial POC phase, where you're at the end of the buying cycle and you've gone through all of this, and then you get to actually go and use it. And you might not actually get what was promised. And then you say, oh, do we continue? Do we try to fix this now? And you try to make a decision based on that. So let's hear some buyer's remorse stories and maybe how we can prevent that sort of thing from happening.
I'd love to open it up. I've got a handful of buyer remorse stories.
Go for it, Eric.
No, go ahead. I think Breezy, you're going.
I just think like the idea that people started building into a contract the things that they were promised during the sales cycle to make sure that it would come to fruition when they buy a product is telling in and of itself. The fact that we have so much distrust that we're like, we have to put the legal language in there so that I can see that it will actually do what you said it could do is like, that's a telling piece. I think we've all had experiences where you maybe misinterpreted it, maybe it was misinterpreted purposefully, or maybe not on purpose to you, like for how a product would work. But yeah, I think most people in the comments have probably also had this experience themselves.
Mandy, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I think for me, like the time that we have buyer's remorse the most is when some executive decides that this is a great tool and they like roll it out. It takes like a year to implement for everyone. And it's like everyone hates it by the end because it was so hard to implement. We actually did this recently at a previous company that I was at with a billing system. We just wanted to be able to bill better in app and not have to have someone talk to someone. And it took over a year to get it started, and it didn't meet stakeholder needs, and it was just a nightmare. And I think that's partially because the users were not involved in the contract decisions. Maybe they saw a demo, but for the most part, it was made at the executive level, and then the users come through and kind of make a stink about what it does. And I think this is also true with like Zoom. I think Zoom organically grew so much because people that like us started using it, and the decision maker wasn't there, and we all said, listen, we want to use Zoom, we think it's better. So you see these kind of, at least in my companies, it's like half of the company uses Google Meet or WebEx and half the company uses Zoom, and it's partially because it's making that transition through virality and organic growth.
Yeah, those are great. I think I'm actually seeing I've seen a lot of buyer's remorse with billing solutions and CPQ solutions because they're so complex. And you often, when you're in that buying cycle, you don't know all of your use cases. Like you can't use the product. You usually get like a really pared down demo environment or trial version of the product where you can't do everything. And when you go through your sales cycle, if you're early in your company's existence or later, like you don't know every single scenario, and it might not fit every single scenario. And purchasing Salesforce CPQ a number of years ago, lots of buyer's remorse because it didn't have this like automated approvals process that I needed, which they did have in like 2 versions up, which cost, I think, triple the amount of money at that time. So yeah, try before you buy.
Before you go on, Eric, Mandy, you mentioned this is kind of interesting. You said that a lot of buyer's remorse comes in when something comes from the top down versus the users getting into it first. And I know the user experience is kind of a pillar of PLG. I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit more of how we can kind of prevent remorse by starting with users instead of executives.
Yeah, I think the benefit of being able to get into the product and look around and try is that you don't have to sign a big contract before you can see it. And therefore, it fits a user experience a lot more. And organically, sometimes users can come up and say, I'm using this great tool by myself. I think you can look at things like Miro, again, Zoom, Slack, all those kind of had that aspect of like, someone in the organization started using it just for like their own use case and then told someone else about it. And it kind of became this solution that eventually gets to an enterprise level. And that virality helps make sure that it can actually be implemented in the organization. And therefore, there's a lot more people that you're trying to convince. You're not trying to convince the head of sales or the VP of finance, something along those lines, to do something. You can see it inside of the product. And that is the pillar of PLG in my mind, is that the user is experiencing the value, you're not trying to convince a decision maker that it will solve their use case. And so it really has to actually then solve their use case. It has to solve their problem point, and you have to speak to them in their language. So instead of saying this will save you a lot of money or a lot of time or a lot of effort, it's more like, I can get my answer quickly, or I can do one click and I get what I need, as opposed to, having to do a full presentation or a full, process involvement. So it really is a different way to sell, which I think is hard when you're making the transition is kind of speaking a different language when you're selling based on who now you're selling to.
Yeah, I think that bottoms up adoption too helps with getting the buy-in that you usually would try to in a sales process navigate yourself and try to get that individual buy-in by giving each person a demo. But instead, you're organically getting that buy-in by people just using your product across the org. So if you're selling into the sales side of a company, then maybe some AEs are using it, or maybe a couple SDRs are using it. Maybe the VP jumps in and uses it. So you're getting buy-in from all these different levels of the org before you're just trying to, give a demo and get a contract signed. Is that instead of like what used to be the process of go and find the person and bring them in, go and find the person and bring them in, you can instead look at your product usage data and say, okay, we already have 2, 3, 4 people from this company using it. Let's get them all together and find a common use case or ways that they've been able to, do whatever it is your product does, drive more revenue, close more X, Y, and Z. So let's get them all together on a call, or let's reach out to their manager because we have 3 or 4 AEs using it. Now let's reach out to the VP of sales and say, hey, 3 of your AEs are using this. It might make sense to roll it out to your whole team. Here's the success they've been seeing. So it kind of changes the way the sales process goes, but I think we are all in agreement that it's kind of like for the betterment of the customer and for the company.
Yeah, I think as a sales team too, you're not like worried that one person that's a champion of your product inside of the app is going to leave the company and then you're going to have to explain why you're important. I think I actually just took a call this morning that was that. It was like, I don't know, the person who liked the software left and then, we didn't know what we were doing with it. And so you're trying to sell again. You're trying to sell to your existing customers because your champion left. So this allows that organic growth to allow multiple people to see value before you get started. And therefore you kind of aren't worried about one person leaving that you had built a good relationship with. You have multiple people within the organization.
Yeah, being on the receiving end of the product-led growth from the sales side, I think one notable system that I just wanted to bring up because I just saw their recent funding around Scratchpad. I am constantly getting pinged by sales reps to onboard that as a company-wide system. It solves a huge pain. It's super easy to use and you can sign up for free and just keep using it. It's great. I love it. So I get 55 Slack messages from every rep. Cool. Ready to move on to let's talk about what the product-led growth process look like. So a lot simpler, a lot more pared down. We go from acquisition. So if we think of that, I'm just going to use Scratchpad as an example here from my use case where a rep is trying to figure out how to update their pipeline kind of more regularly, more consistently, and easier. They just sign up for free. They begin using it. They share it with 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, and then the entire sales team is pinging the head of RevOps that we need this tool. And that usage is really what's driving that adoption and kind of the stickability. We use stickability as a word of the product. And that's where you start closing the bigger deals. I don't know if we wanted to dig in here a little bit, Zach, or.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple interesting points that come up here. Kind of what we were talking before. In my mind, this basically turns the entire funnel upside down. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing is in a traditional funnel, you are asking for money and then delivering the value. And this is delivering the value and then asking for money. And so it's kind of interesting that we are giving the product away for free eventually and building. I come from my previous role was at a company that very much they analyzed communications between buyers and sellers. And it was very much about what you talked about, identifying the champion and making sure there's engagement, making sure that you're always talking to the right people. Whereas this in a lot of ways is kind of interesting because we're generating champions across the board just exponentially. And it's just happening through usage. So I think where I'm going with this is when we look at this, we kind of are thinking like, okay, when is somebody ready to talk about the product? When are they ready to move from that kind of free user role into making a purchase decision? So when it gets into that, like what are we going to say? What is a product qualified lead, and how does that compare to a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this one off. I'm sure we'll pass it around a bit, but
Yeah.
in the same way that we think of an MQL today as a combination of demographic and firmographic data, meaning what's their title, what company size are they at, how many employees do they have, where's the territory location, et cetera. So that demographic and firmographic information combined with things that they've done that interact with our marketing materials, whether that's attending an event or reading something or a content downloaded or whatever it may be. So in the same way that we have this combination of data and that creates our MQL, the PQL is a similar combination of the same demographic and firmographic data, but also including in the product usage data. So saying, okay, they've invited X amount of users into the product, or we have X amount of users from the same account using our product, or they've tried a certain feature, or whatever it may be. I think that's sort of like the concept there is similar. The big difference from my point of view between the MQL and the PQL is that an MQL is exactly that. There's a definition for your MQL, and with a PQL, there's many times multiple definitions for what a PQL might be. So when someone first signs up and gets to some level of product usage, then that might be their first time being a PQL. And then maybe they are, inviting more users or hitting certain features that aren't part of the tier that they're currently in. Now they're a PQL again, and so on and so forth, which also is sort of bringing up the idea that in a traditional sales process, you would kind of sign a contract, and then that would be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contract. But in product-led growth, you have multiple opportunities for expansion over a year, and so or 2 years or 3 years. So you might expand 2, 3, 10 times over a year, which is very different. But yeah, so I'd say one of the biggest differences, though, just kind of going back to the last point, is that there are sort of like multiple definitions for that PQL opportunity, and you might be a PQL multiple times over and over again. And so getting that product usage data is super critical for the revenue team here.
Yeah, great points, Breezy. I can come up with like a specific example that we use, but I will just say the people that you're selling to that are the easiest to sell to are the ones that are already in your product and using it. So the opportunity to sell to them multiple times and have conversations with them about upsells is a really big advantage of product-led growth, because you can add on those small features without overwhelming the customer in the very beginning. So for me, I used to work at a company that sold sales and marketing automation software, and they were already utilizing our product. We also were implementing a new revenue or a building e-commerce part of the app, and we wanted more people to use it. So we looked at our existing customer base, and our goal was just to get them to start using one-to-one invoices. Once they started doing that, we identified okay, if they send 20 invoices to 20 different people with the same product on it, they might be ready for an automation or a checkout form type environment where anyone can use that. It's a one-to-many solution. You can just put that on a site or send that link out, and anyone can buy the product directly without having an invoice that's specific to them. So that was an ideal PQL for us to look at that next, and that was kind of in our next tier, was to get automated billing one-to-many. And so that was an opportunity for our sales team to reach out and say, instead of sending 20 invoices individually to people, you can send one link to 20 people through a campaign. And it was just a good way for us to identify people who are already utilizing the product, already getting value. And then they felt like, oh, wow, they saw when I was experiencing maybe pain, or I was experiencing something that was taking a lot of time and effort to create those one-off invoices, and they contacted me at the right time. And it's a good example of selling to our existing customer base something in an additional tier or an additional payment revenue opportunity for them, and that helped our sales team make some upsell opportunities.
I have a question for both of you here from kind of the other side of the fence. Oftentimes, the sales team will be using one of these products to great effect, and the sales rep at the company will reach out and say, look, 10 of your reps are using this. Let's talk about how we can expand and make better use of the product. There are a lot of objections I have. Like I'll come into like, well, if they're already using it, it's already working great. Like, why do I need to purchase more if what they're using meets all of our needs? Like, how do you overcome that in the product-led growth world? Like, if you're giving everything away for free or very cheap, like, how do you make that case for the upsell? If one, like maybe the value isn't completely there, and two, like, how are you giving me more value or more of a use case to like purchase it company-wide? That question made sense, I hope.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you can do. First of all, I guess it would depend on if your goal is to move them up to a next tier or if the goal is to get them on like a team plan. Because a lot of times you'll find like, if we're using the reps and VP example, so maybe there's individual reps who are using some software, but it's not rolled out to the entire team. So you have 4 people who are using it and their performance is higher than the others. And you can have some level of showing results on what they've been able to do. But maybe you have 10 total reps. So maybe it makes sense to, first of all, combine those 4 who are paying individually with the other 6, knock a discount on the top. So it's not just, adding 6, but adding 6 and giving some level of a discount, get everybody on the team plan. It's easier to centrally manage it. You don't have data in different locations. So there's some value that could be added there. And then in terms of if you're the goal is to get them sort of to a different feature usage or something that they might not have today. I mean, it's just all about adding value. It's like, here's what you're able to do with this increased tier of usage. And here's where your team is today. Here's where they could be using that is, and then if the value isn't there, then honestly, that might just be like a product on the other side issue, but like, hopefully that value is there and you can make a good use case for that. Also, this is where sales comes in. This is like a clear example of sales isn't going out the window with product-led growth. It's still here. And this is where some of your strong sales tactics, I think, would come into play.
Yeah.
I agree with Breezy. I think that in general, this is where sales shines in knowing who they're talking to. So if your sales team is using it, but you're talking to the internal systems VP, that's a much different conversation than talking to the VP of sales. And it's about figuring out what the value is for that decision maker you're using, whether it's your reps are saving time, you'll have better security by having this solution. You'll be able to save a discount and not have 5 expense reports you have to do every month or every quarter. So I think it just kind of depends, and that's where sales really shines. I also think that's where like your pricing has to match with the value. So if you're trying to sell now sort of an enterprise deal, there has to be a carrot to make it an enterprise deal. If it's the same price and the same features as a one-off solution, you're just not going to be able to sell very often at an enterprise level. So there has to be some level of additional features, additional cost savings, additional value or security, something along those lines. And so pricing has to fit. And I think that is a very underutilized place in most enterprise sales organizations. Every organization I've been at, it's like we kind of pull a number out of the air or pull from based on what our competitors are doing, but like, then there's nowhere to upsell. We have that conversation all the time. It's like, we don't have anything to upsell. We don't have a usage-based solution. We have, you buy per seat, and if you don't need more seats, then you don't ever need to do anything differently. So that's where pricing can play a really big impact, and where product-led growth shines is when you have the pricing right and can make adjustments to it and can make it fit for whatever deal you're trying to do at that point.
I want to touch on something really quick here because it's really Breezy. I like that you mentioned it. PLG is not replacing sellers or sales reps. That there's still very much a place for sales within this new world of PLG. And so there really is there's still a traditional sales process in there somewhere. So when we think about kind of where we're coming from and where we're headed, what does the balance look like between that traditional funnel and that PLG funnel? Like where's the kind of the middle ground where sellers are still involved?
Yeah, I think that there's all of the things that everyone's doing today, whether that's on marketing, sales, customer success, all of those things will still apply in the future, just maybe in a slightly different way. So for sales specifically, one of the shifts is that idea we talked about where there's so many expansion opportunities, right? So then you think of how does that shift then for the sales comp side, and then how does that change their job? Because comp usually dictates the way that people work. So if you comp 25% on the land of a deal and 75% on the expand of a deal, then what's going to happen is that your reps are going to not only be highly involved in getting a customer to, initially come on and become a customer, but they're going to be involved in that process throughout the entire customer lifecycle, making sure that they're successful, because if they're not, then they don't get comped on any of the expand. So that's good for the customer and good for the sales rep to make sure that the customer is successful, and then making sure that they're utilizing all parts of your product, getting all the value that they can, so that hopefully they continue to use it to higher levels or roll it out to more users or more teams, et cetera. And so the way that the sales team works is still similar to how it is today in some regards, but also there's kind of just more sort of checks and balances in place to make sure that both the customer and the entire rollout is successful. So we, like, for instance, we dog food correlated at Correlated, right? So what we do is we send notifications into Slack to say to our sales reps, like, hey, people are doing X, Y, Z in the product, it might make sense to reach out to them. Or like kick off an outreach sequence and have an email sent to them to say, hey, I saw you were trying to do X in the product, but maybe it wasn't successful, or maybe it would make sense if you built it in this way. So it's like selling today, but like on steroids, I guess. It's like the next level of selling.
I was gonna say, it actually sounds really beneficial for sellers because you're arming them with so much more knowledge and capability when it comes to winning deals.
Yeah, and I the pipeline for sellers seems to be consistently a lot larger. I wish I had solid data around that, and I don't have perfect data to back it up, but just anecdotally from teams that I talk to and companies that I look at, there seems to be a lot more pipeline for sellers to work with at a product-led growth company.
Yeah, I think along those lines, I have that conversation. If you've ever been on a marketing team, like generally it's like, marketing says sales is not closing our leads that we're giving them. And then sales is like, they're crap leads. So this is like a place to bridge that gap of where you say, I don't want to send you no leads. I don't want to take your leads away by using product-led growth. I want to send them back to you when they're like 80% ready to convert to the next level. And you can have a conversation that's informed with them and be talking through what they've done in the app versus not. It also, I think this is where like a demo tool or something that allows when you as a sales rep can watch someone interact with the product and see where they got stuck and see where their pain points were, that is the most powerful thing that you've ever been able to use. I think, at least for me, even on the product side, like watching someone rage click on something, you're like, oh, that's the word. Or watching 5 pop-ups happen when they're just trying to look at the value. Those types of things can give so much insight to make you feel like you're actually talking to the person who knows what you've done in the product, as opposed to explaining to them what's happened and what your pain points are. So I think that's where even a demo type tool that allows for that, for a user to experience value, but also for the sales rep to see what they did and where they had issues and where they saw problems, is just so powerful. It has to make the sales process easier in a lot of cases.
One of the takeaways I'm hearing here is product-led growth equals happier salespeople. You're talking, is that accurate? Like you're talking to people who actually want to talk to you, whereas like most salespeople talk to people who don't want to talk to them.
I think that's true. And the ironic piece about this is that I hear a lot of pushback from people who are currently in sales, not at product-led companies, who feel like product-led growth is going to replace them. So for you to say, sounds like product-led growth means happy sellers, it's like, yes, this is what I'm trying to tell everybody. Like, this is going to be better for you. You're gonna, know your customers better. You're gonna close more deals. You're gonna have more pipeline. You're gonna have the data and insights that you actually need. Your conversations are gonna be relevant. Like, it's all good stuff. I think the initial pushback, feeling like product is going to, by letting people use the product, it will take away something that you currently have today. I think it just changes the way that it works. But as long as we can shift and adjust, I think it's for the better for for everyone involved.
Yeah,
It's,
and
it's
I
like
think,
oh, go ahead, Mandy.
go ahead, Eric, go ahead, you go first.
Oh, I think it's like the difference between an outbound BDR and an inbound SDR. The inbound SDRs to me always seem happier. They're talking to people who want to talk to them.
Yeah. And I will just say, I think the dirty secret here is that it is a growing pain. Like if you're a growth leader, Breezy probably knows, like this is a part that's going to be a growing pain, because there's going to be this period where like you're kind of taking the leads and saying, don't call them, we're going to put them in the product and get some information from them. And that's going to take time, and your sales reps are going to be sitting there twiddling their thumbs. There is a period where you kind of have to make that transition. You have to adjust comp sometimes. You have to, and that can be hard, and it can be a place where like you about face. I've seen that at companies a lot, where it's like, we're going to make this change, it didn't work, okay, you have to kind of sell that it is a point where it's going to eventually pay off. You have to just be strong, and you have to weather the storm kind of as the sales side, and trust that we have the right strategy in place. And that's where executive buy-in for PLG is really important as well. But it's not all roses until you get there. I think it just takes a little bit of time, but once it's there, then you can see all the value, and companies that started there are actually seeing a lot of success just because they didn't have to overcome that change or that shift inside of their organization.
That's a good call out.
Yeah, trust is the big piece there, right? Got to trust what product's doing, got to trust what leadership is doing.
Yeah, we always say, like, you have to give me 6 months. You have to give me 6 months. No matter what, we're not turning around. We're going. So, it just takes a little bit of time to shift the funnel.
Yeah, I think it's important too that you said adjust comp, right? So it's important to just make sure that as people put their trust in you during this transition, that you're also showing that you value them. So, and compensation, and of course, non-compensation related, like, giving kudos where they're earned. But I think it's good that you're kind of showing both sides of that, though, because as an employee going through a big change like that, knowing that your leadership team is trusting them in that movement, but then also having them sort of back it up with tangible items is important.
Cool. All right. Next. All right, bridging the gap to higher impact, bigger deals. Now we're going to dive into kind of where PLG kind of merges into the enterprise world. So the challenge here is, how do we bring larger deals or more enterprise level products, like more complex products, those Salesforces, those HubSpots? How do we bring the product into the conversation a lot earlier? So how can I create a version of the product that's more easily shown? And how do we make that show better and more personalized? I could just read through all of these, but it's probably a good idea to just open up the conversation here. We touched on, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about demo tools. Zach and I are from a company that specializes in this, so we'll have a lot to talk about here. But I'm curious, like, what are people's thoughts here? And Zach, did you have any specific stuff you wanted to dive into?
Yeah, what we could think about here is really how we get all of the benefits of PLG with a tool like we discussed, that you can, like a scratch pad that you can jump right on, use right away, that your sales reps are screaming at you to purchase, please. And how you could bring that to a really large, complex type of tool that requires a lot of hand holding and a lot of effort to even get up and running, that no single user would want to go through the effort of doing that themselves. So how do you kind of balance that, and how do you give people the experience of using a product like that without actually putting them in charge of some sort of crazy implementation in order to get it going? So kind of, what these questions are kind of around, what does that look like? And right now, prior to this, the only solution was to, well, you got to demo it. But now with platforms like Demostack, we have a little bit more options for giving users a bit of a more custom and personalized experience with a large, complex product. So I think with these questions, what we're really asking is, how do we create that PLG experience within an enterprise motion? And I don't know if you guys have any feedback on that or ideas that you have for kind of bringing that experience into it.
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes for what we've seen on our side is that when you go to set up a product and you're like, this is going to be our free trial or a free product, we're going to let someone like loose to look inside of it without us there, and we want to make sure they get the right value. It can be difficult to figure out where the value is for that one user and make that the same for everyone. And so, and also if we say, let's just say like getting a sale is the most important thing, and that's what we want to show, there's usually 20 steps before that a customer has to do in order to even get to the point where they're making a sale. And so for us, what I like about sort of a demo environment, or what I think could be helpful in a product-led approach, is that you can either start someone halfway through the product and say, we've got some dummy data in here, but we're going to start here so that you can see that this is the big point that we're trying to make, or you can make it easily for different use cases. So it is a much more personalized experience for that user, but they actually get to try and interact. I don't know if anyone's ever been on like a test drive for a car where like the salesperson has actually driven. You're like, this is not helping me understand if I'm gonna like this car or not. Like that doesn't help. So having a salesperson only go through now, that it's in our nature now, and what we see every day with our iPhones, that we can go through and we can actually play and interact with it. And I think that's just the expectation now for younger generations, is that if someone isn't driving you around, you're actually experiencing it. And that's where I think making sure you drop them into the right part of the demo or the right part of the product is really important, and interacting with that is key. If they can't, it's going to be a much harder sell in the long run.
Yeah, I would say some of the more uncomfortable demos I've experienced have been either me or somebody on my side literally telling the rep what to click. Like, can you click on that? All right, now click on that. All right, now type in this. And it's like it's like, those, to use your analogy, Mandy, it's like those driver's ed cars where you have the steering wheel on the other side that can sort of do everything.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly uncomfortable. And it shows like, one, they don't have the resources in the demo environment to show me and my persona like what I would naturally want to see, because what we were telling them to click or asking them to click through is a natural flow for the two of us who are on the call. Sorry, Breezy, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Those were good examples. Some of the ways I was thinking about how did other companies solve this in a creative way, especially when COVID was in its early days and everyone was like, what's happening with the data? Where is it moving? I did see some companies in the data space basically showcase their product, but using publicly available data sets. And a lot of these were different COVID data sets or some other topic that was of interest. And I think that was a really creative way to show off a complex product, and in the same idea of doing a product tour, a product demo, and using dummy data. But in this case, the dummy data was just a publicly available data set, which I also thought was a really interesting way to sort of go about it. But I'd be curious to hear about some of the use cases that you all have over at Demostack, or some examples of things that were really successful in being able to let people kind of tour themselves through the product.
Cool. That actually is a really great segue into the next slide, because I want to talk a little bit about demo environments. And Breezy, to your point about using those publicly available data sets, that's kind of intertwined here. So when we think of those like traditional demo environments, there's two listed here. I can make a case for a third one, but we think of like, I will often be on demos where the rep is showing me live production data. Like they're actually in the product, they're actually using it. I can see it's not a dummy Salesforce instance, whatever. And some big concerns here are PII and sensitive data exposure. Like you're showing me real email addresses, real names, real phone numbers. You get that a lot when you do demos of like data enrichment tools, for instance. If there's a production downtime, you have that exposure and that risk. And like you can't show those upcoming features, which are always, always a big draw for especially earlier stage companies. And then you have the do-it-yourself environments. These are often like just copies of production. They're a big drain on like R&D resources or sales engineering solutions architecture resources. And I think this, Breezy, to your point, is where the publicly available like domain or data goes into, but you still have to maintain that, right? Like if you have one demo environment that's used for your entire sales team and they're in there demoing it every day and messing around with stuff, then the next time the other rep goes in there, they're seeing like crazy records being created or everything's changed. So it's really hard to keep track of like where everything lives. How often do you refresh this environment? And then I think the third one I can make the case for is you have these like either like a hybrid of the two. It's like a production environment, a copy of that's not actually a demo environment that everybody shares. But those are kind of like the main drawbacks of using specific, production or like environments. Curious what your take on that is, and I'm happy to kind of talk through in a minute, like how Demostack is kind of positioning ourselves there. And I can also let Zach jump into.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job of touching on it. And I think really a big problem that we're seeing that Demostack really solves is the personalization aspect of these demos and how, with a production environment or a DIY demo environment, even just changing the names of the fake persona that you're showing or the company logos or whatever it may be can be a really difficult task. It can involve engineering resources, it can involve product resources, and it's taking them off of actually creating features that you can go and sell. And so you're absorbing all of this really important time of these really valuable resources to do little things like that. And so where something like Demostack comes in Demostack, you literally just click a name and you can change it. You can literally just click a logo and you can change it. And so when it comes to looking at a production versus DIY demo environment, you're really going to have the same issue there. Whereas in Demostack, you can create completely custom personalized environments with a few clicks of a mouse. And I think when we're looking at PLG, having that personalized touch, having that true experience of being immersed within the platform and feeling like it's yours, that's where something like that really comes in and is super important and really contributes to that, bridging that gap between PLG and enterprise sales.
Yeah, I think along those points, I think one of the things that we've experienced is like if you're on a sales call with like some VP and you show them the demo that you've curated, and right away they like take you up course and they're like, no, I don't care about that. Show me this part, show me the reporting on the back end. And you're like, I don't have any data in here. I can't show you reporting yet. Yeah. Like there's that kind of thing that happens as well. And a lot of times I think what happens then is someone may open their own app or their own version, and that's where you get nervous. You're showing information maybe they shouldn't see. And that can be scary, or it's just like, no, we can't show you that today, which is never going to go over well. So I think that's where having that experience that's a little bit more curated, but that you can kind of change things on the fly. You can make sure data is uploaded, even if it's for the next time, but at least, you can have a production environment that's a little bit more safe for that is really helpful, I think, and where a tool like Demostack could really come into place. And also to your point, if like everyone's sharing the same thing, like, I don't know if you've ever been on a demo where like something changes while you're on the call and it's someone's being funny and they put a name in there that they shouldn't have in a way. And then you're on a call with a VP who sees that. You can avoid some of that with that, but also give that curated experience, which really helps.
Yeah, there's a cool piece to touch on there. And one is that, I described like the person I was on the call with literally directing the rep on where to click. There's the idea of like, how about creating that custom demo environment using something like using Demostack, and then being able to send that demo environment and letting them actually drive for themselves and poking around and looking at whatever they want to see. Like it takes kind of the onus of like driving that demo and being thrown that curveball at the beginning, like, I don't care about any of this, just show me that one, that piece. Like, they can just click on it, do it themselves, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think people, they want to do that on their own time, kind of. I don't want someone watching me as I'm like trying to click around the product, and I don't want them thinking, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing. And you don't want to feel like you're taking a test that you're being monitored for. So I think at times people just want to do it on their own time. They want to try things by themselves, and that's kind of the way we live today. And so it's really important to have a tool that allows them to do that.
And one of the recurring things I keep thinking about as we talk about this is it's just all boiling down to the customer choosing, like, what's best for them, what's the best way for them to engage with you, with your product, with your team. So yeah, I mean, this is a great route for that.
Cool. All right, so just next on to, we touched on a lot of this earlier, but it's really that enterprise focused product-led growth. So if we think of that acquisition, the qualification, and the discovery, that's the PQL, PLQ. I'm a little dyslexic, I apologize. PQ, product qualified lead. Then that's where, right after that, that's where we can jump into these kind of in-depth demo environments, let them kind of drive their own demo of those new features, the higher platform level, whatever is creating the most value for them before moving into that negotiation phase. I think we touched on this quite a bit, but open up for any conversation here before kind of moving into our wrap up.
Yeah, I think the two things I have here is what's really important, I think, with this to notice is that the product encompasses almost every single stage of the cycle, starting at the very beginning. And that's when you have something like a demo experience platform. If you're on that very first call, like, we've had people say, can I see the product? Very first call, you say, yeah, sure. You can literally pull up your demo experience platform and have a ready to go demo that can show your buyer exactly what they want to see at that moment. And so it's really involving the product first from the very first moments of contact, really. But based on our previous discussion and kind of getting to this point, what I really was thinking that might be valuable to talk about is you have a team with a traditional sales process. They have a traditional sales team structure. How do you take that structure and that process and start to bring it into a PLG motion? What would you suggest for a team to kind of start transforming themselves into more of a PLG type process?
Get the data and insights that you need to be able to do your job. But I laugh while I say it, but it is true. I think, everything that you work with today and the things that you have in your CRM, they help you be effective in the way that you work. And even like if you're going to reach out to someone who's an MQL, you at least know the different actions that they've taken to become that MQL. And in the same way, you want to try to have those insights at your fingertips. I think the other thing is, being flexible, going with the flow a little bit. It's going to be a little bit bumpy. And there'll be some kinks to work out, but as long as you have a really strong team, I'm sure you will all be able to kind of, work on that together. And then I guess my last piece of advice that I usually say to folks who are thinking of making a shift from being more sales-led to being more product-led is don't let like perfection get in the way of doing a test for something. It doesn't mean you have to like roll it out and that's the end all be all, is now everyone can just dive into your product and it's like mayhem. It's like you can take steps to do this at a time. You can use Demostack to be able to show different product tours or let people kind of tour themselves around it. Or you can, use the phrase of just put a button on your website, have some sort of a button where people can get started with your product and then manually whitelist them for a little bit and see how that test goes and see what you learned there. So those are a couple small tips I have for people getting started.
Yeah, I think along those same lines, that's what I usually have conversations with. And on my side is that it's not all or nothing. We're not like you're either gluten-free or not. Like this is not, you don't have to decide. Like you can go very small and start with one use case and one new set and have a demo for just that part. You can start with upsells versus your new customers, so you're not impacting your overall funnel at the beginning. You can have a hybrid. You don't have to have everything PLG or everything enterprise sales. You can take the best of all of it and come up with what works for your product and your department and your teams. So don't think that it's like a complete like shift to a completely new way of doing things. You really can go slowly. Example, we started more with expansion PLG sort of focus as opposed to new acquisition. We took only our existing customers that we knew were already fans and tried to create something, and then eventually took those principles down to help with acquisition. So I think it's just not an all or nothing thing.
Awesome.
Great. I think it all just kind of boils down to this last point, which is delivering better product storytelling, better, earlier, faster, getting people visually inside that product, seeing what they want to see. It's really Demostack's goal is to make everybody's product 1,000 times easier to see and to navigate than it is now, without sacrificing like the feel or the bells and whistles that you do when you're just showing a PowerPoint or like a really hacky demo environment.
Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything we wanted to talk about today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. This was great.
Yeah.
Bye,
Hi, everyone.
Zach.
Thanks, everyone.